Hey guys, what is cracking? It's Krakenation. I am coming at you guys today with the draft breakdown for the Draft Classic Season 3, previously known as the Kraken Cup. But I want to stop reminding you guys of that because I feel like I've said that in every video regarding the Draft Classic. But the draft weekend just happened. It was very exciting, great time. If you guys want to check out the absolute slog that was the live stream through both days, day 1 and day 2, definitely go and check that out. At the very least, if you want to go and maybe check out some people's picks as they were happening live, some live analysis, that stuff is cool, as well as if you are curious about the overall draft rankings, draft grades for every team in the Draft Classic and want to get some expert analysis on that, I definitely recommend you go and check out the previous video for the Syracuse Sylveons, as well as the video prior to that, which was the draft grades and power rankings for week 1 for every single team in the league. We had a couple expert analysis on in Sean Inversify and Noah Strokefish, and they really helped, I feel like, go into a lot of depth that maybe your average draft grade, draft analysis video doesn't go into. We kind of went really into the nitty-gritty of what makes good drafts beyond the surface level. So if you really want to see some expert analysis on some drafts and see what we think, I definitely recommend you go and check that out. But without further ado, today we're going to be focusing on the Boston Bisharps, my team, coached by yours truly, Krakenation. So we got this draft going, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to go break this down with this individual Pokemon. At the end, I'm going to give a quick recap of just how everything plays out as a maybe overall synergies, but this is just going to be kind of like a touch upon every single Pokemon, discuss what it's doing for this team, and then hopefully at the end, you guys like what we put together. So let's go ahead and start taking a look here. So first up on our list, we've got Mega Scizor. So Mega Scizor was my first round pick. I picked it up with the 6th pick in round 1. I'm very glad that it made it to me. I think it may very well be the best Pokemon we allow this season, although it's definitely close with things such as Magearna, Mega Alakazam, Mega Latios with Aura Sphere, obviously Mega Alakazam having Nasty Plot, all those Pokemon being allowed. Definitely a tight field. But the fact that I got Scizor at 6 is a pick that I was both comfortable with, felt confident in, and think I got good value for. And why is Mega Scizor a good Pokemon? I'm going to tell you guys why right now. We got amazing typing, first of all. Bug Steel leaves it with only one weakness in the Fire type, a plethora of really great resistances. It's just fantastic. And furthermore, that fact that its only weakness is fire is further augmented by the fact that hidden powers were removed from Generation 8 and are not currently allowed in most draft leagues, including case in point, Draft Classic. So hidden powers of not being allowed in the game makes Mega Scizor that much harder to answer. There's a lot of times where just a Mega Scizor can just set up and just win games outright because nothing on the team has a way to 2-hit KO it if you're running the right bulky spread. Hidden Power Fires was a move that a lot of maybe like bulky waters would potentially run if they weren't just clicking Scald, or a lot of random moves Pokemon would get to hit this as coverage. And it was just an auto bring in a lot of matchups against Mega Scizor. And the fact that Hidden Power Fire is now removed from the game means Pokemon that to hit this, you really need to rely on fire coverage, so you need to have Flamethrower and Fire Blast. And while those are not uncommon coverage moves, now I know whether or not my opponent can have coverage, and I'm not playing the guessing game of Hidden Power Fire every single time. It's also a versatile role filler, and that's to say it can be a really, really great sweeper. It's a good pivot for me. It's a defogger. It's a tank. It's a wall. It's basically anything you need it to be. It can play defensive matches. It can even play stall. You can run like a Toxic Roost U-turn knockoff set or something, and that set's very, very good. You could run Defog on that set. You could run, obviously, a Sweeper set. As we all know, it gets like Curse as well, which is underrated, I think. So just really versatile role filler. I got my Steel type early. I got a good Hazard Clear early at that. Obviously, this Pokemon doesn't want to have to run Hazard Clearing because every week it could very well threaten the Sweep, which is its best set. Swords Dance, 2 attacks, 3 attacks, maybe. You never know. But we'll see. I think it's just going to be really versatile and hard to predict on a week-to-week basis. It's got a lot of defensive and offensive potential, like I just kind of was touching upon. It's got that great defensive typing and amazing natural bulk. It's got just a plethora of resistances, as well as just the fact that it has an insane attack stat, Technician, Bullet Punch for priority, Quick Attack as well. And then it's also got stuff like Bug Bite, Knockoff, Superpower, all that good stuff that Mega Scizor has come to be known for. So I think it's just got a lot of defensive and offensive potency that's going to make it really hard to prep for on a week-to-week basis. Finally, I always thought this Pokemon looks sweet, and so that's a huge pro in my book. This Pokemon looks sick. So we're going to take a look at the next Pokemon on our list. This was in the second round. I picked this up at the, 15th pick in the second round or 14th or something, whatever like the inverse of 6 is in a 20-man draft, and I got Garchomp. I was really worried this Pokemon wasn't going to fall to me, especially the way that Dragon started coming off the board towards the end of round 1 and the early beginning part of round 2, where things like Hydreigon, Latias, Latios, Zygarde all just started flying off the board all around the same time. I was worried Garchomp wasn't going to fall to me. Garchomp was my number 1 pick. It's the Pokemon I wanted at this spot, so I was thankful that all my Dragon type backups went and not Garchomp, because Garchomp was the one I actually wanted, so I was really happy about that. First up, we got to talk about the fact that I have a lot of experience with Garchomp, and it's a Pokemon I've used, I think, to great success at many key points in all of my draft competitive play and just any kind of competitive Pokemon I've played. Garchomp is a Pokemon that I've absolutely been in love with for so long. It's one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, just in general. I think it looks cool. I think it plays well. I think I know how to use it well. It's deceptively versatile. It's got a great speed tier, which is the first thing I want to talk about. That 102 speed to get those nifty outspeeds on things, all the base 100s, as we know that is such a common speed tier. Furthermore, those base 100s often run Scarf, and Garchomp is also a great Scarf user, outspeeding almost everything with a Scarf. It's also an offensive powerhouse. It's got access to Sword Dance, but it's also got just great stabs. Earthquake is insane. As I probably don't need to remind you guys, but it's also got 130 as well as a decent special attack stat and some special attacking move pool like Flamethrower and Earth Power, stuff like Dracos. Basically just Chain Chomp of old could still see a pretty effective comeback where you just run that Life Orb Draco and then click the Earthquake or something. I think another thing I want to talk about is that it's deceptively bulky. A Pokemon, people kind of in Gen 7, even Gen 6, Gen 7, Tank Chomp, really Gen 6 I should say actually, Tank Chomp was in full swing. And back then in ORAS, Tank Chomp was just so effective on the ladder, which is very interesting because Garchomp is a Pokemon generally known for being such a potent offensive wall breaker kind of just threat, right? But the fact that it's got this insane bulk kind of augmented because of its fantastic HP stat, very usable defense stat, and honestly not even that exploitable special defense stat. If you invest in the right defenses, and then you also have that rough skin ability, it makes you really potentially effective as a physical wall. Tank Chomp becomes a really good Pokemon. You can run that Stealth Rock. Tank Chomp with Rocky Helmet, Rough Skin, Endure was a Krakenation staple back in the day. I always loved Endure Garchomp just to force physical attackers to take so much unnecessary damage touching you all the time. So just deceptively bulky Pokemon. It gets things like Toxic, Stealth Rocks. And then you can, on those bulkier sets, you can still run Sword Dance to potentially be a wall breaker if you need to. So just a really, really good set overall. And finally, it's got key role and typing synergy. Obviously, I picked up a defogger with my first pick. I really like to stress picking up early role fillers, things like Hazard Setters and Hazard Clears early on in the draft, because I think if you are forced to bring low-tier Pokemon to fill those roles on a week-to-week basis. Obviously, some weeks those Pokemon are going to have good matchups, but a lot of weeks they're not. That's why they're low tier. So if you can have these good Hazard Clears, Hazard Setters in the earlier parts of your draft, you're going to be pretty effective overall. And also, obviously, the typing synergy with Mega Scizor is pretty fantastic. Garchomp covers those fire types really, really well. You can take those Earthquakes, and then we have on the other side, Scizor can switch into the fairies of the world that threaten Garchomp, the dragon types that threaten Garchomp, the ice types that threaten Garchomp. So these two form a really, really potent offensive core in just my first two picks. There's obviously kind of a struggle here with bulky waters. In general, we don't have a Scald switch in early, which is where my next pick kind of came into play. So let's go ahead and talk about the next pick that was supposed to be Suicune, got sniped pretty early on before it got to me. And so I ended up settling for Tapu Fini, which was a little bit more of an overpay, but I get that high tier fairy. I get a defogger, which is really nice, and therefore I've completed this top tier core. I've got a Fairy Dragon Steel core, if that's what you're looking at. I didn't really draft it in mind to be a Fairy Dragon Steel core. Like I said, obviously I was going for Suicune, so Fairy Dragon Steel was not up in front in my mind, but I was looking for a bulky, like a Scald switch in. Tapu Fini is that. What's kind of cool about Tapu Fini actually is it also covers a couple of my weaknesses of my top tiers, specifically the Scald problem, but it also helps them not get burned if the terrain, misty terrain, is up. Now, something I want to talk about is obviously people are concerned that Tapu Fini with Garchomp, you can't click dragon moves. First of all, I want to say misty terrain's not going. It's like it's going to be up for the whole match. I can plan around that. At absolute worst case scenario, misty terrain is going to be up for only 3 turns maximum that Garchomp is on the field, because you have to switch into Garchomp. And even then, let's say if I was going to be clicking dragon moves, chances are I'm a Swords Dancing Garchomp, it sounds like. On average, if I'm not, I'm probably Scarf, I guess. But I just feel like there's not that many situations on an average day, on an average battle, where you're going to even have that anti-synergy exist. And even if it did happen all the time. Garchomp doesn't click dragon moves as often as I think people think. Garchomp, I consider myself, I'm maybe not the foremost Garchomp expert, but definitely an experienced Garchomp player, and Garchomp is a Pokemon that usually just clicks Earthquake and then runs a coverage move. Dragon Claw is usually considered a coverage move on this thing when Earthquake isn't hitting things like flying types. But a lot of flying types you hit with your Stealth Rocks, or sorry, your Stone Edge, your Stone Edge or your Rock Slide, or if they're like a Skarmory or a Corviknight, you're going to run a Fire move to hit them. So it's not like Dragon Claw was always a go-to move. A lot of times Garchomp sets are Earthquake, Swords Dance, Stealth Rocks, and then another coverage move, and that sometimes was Dragon Claw, Outrage, I'll admit, but other times it was just something like Stone Edge. It was really common. Edgequake, maybe even more common than Dragon Claw was Stone Edge, or it was something like a Fire Fang or a Flamethrower, or an Aqua Tail. This Pokemon gets a lot of different options there, and just because that one Dragon move is anti-synergized with Tapu Fini, I don't want to stress that too much. But now let's get back to Tapu Fini though. It's a great partner for those top threats because it answers those water types really well. Tapu Fini, between things like Taunt, Nature's Madness, they can't run Toxic obviously, but it just has a lot of options to beat up on those bulky waters of the world. It can switch into the water types Scalds without fearing getting burned itself, which is really, really nice. I think that's actually maybe even makes this a slightly better fit than the Suicune, which is really cool. Which is a really good partner for those, as well as that's being a defogger that I needed. So just completes. I have 2 defoggers already in my top 3 Pokemon, one of which is a really good defogger. Now, obviously, defog has some anti-synergy with Tapu Fini. I guess now in Gen 8, defog clears away terrain. I'm not really stressed about that as well. I don't think people, I just feel like in general, when you say these things and you talk about these anti-synergies, you just got to think like, okay, how often is that really going to happen? Because that means they had to run Toxic on a Pokemon to Toxic Tapu Fini specifically after it defogged. And that, don't get me wrong, could happen. I just think the number of times that's going to be exploitable this season where Tapu Fini is going to be in, I'm going to have clicked defog, and I'm going to be Toxic on the exact turn where I don't have terrain up. It's just few and far between at worst. So I just feel like that's not a big deal. But it just gives me that general synergy, and then it provides a defensive role, which is fantastic for me. It gives me that versatile defender that could be physically or especially defensive, and it's also a really nice win condition because Calm Mind Fini is an absolute threat. It also gets Haze, I think, to prevent other win cons, maybe like these bulkier win cons, from being an issue for me. So it got Draining Kiss this generation, which is really cool for it because it always relied on leftovers for recovery. So now between you can run a really nice Draining Kiss, Surf, Draining Kiss, Surf, Calm Mind set now, which is really cool. Then maybe like Energy Ball or something to hit water types, and then you're basically all set because Draining Kiss is going to help you get some more passive recovery in these defensive win con conditions. I feel like that is actually a pretty big buff to that set, and I'm really excited to use this Pokemon. So let's talk about the next guy, and this was a Pokemon where I was really up in the air about. It's Pokemon I've got a lot of experience with. I was thinking about drafting Mesprit later in the draft, but I ended up wanting to secure AZELF after Raikou went off the board. AZELF fulfills that fantastic speed tier for me, so I was pretty happy with that. It also is, again, another rocker, so it's offensively unpredictable is the first thing I want to talk about. The fact that it can hit either physically or specially. It got a couple new moves, things like Stored Power and Play Rough this generation. Unfortunately, it did not get Ice Beam. Ice Beam is a move that I feel like AZELF has always really, really wanted because whenever you want to run Ice coverage, which is just really powerful coverage move, obviously, you have to run Physical, which is never ideal because your physical Psychic move is not Psychic or Psyshock, it's Zen Headbutt. So I think Physical AZELF tends to be a little suboptimal compared to Special AZELF because on Special side, you can run like your Psychic, your Fire Blast, things of that nature. So Physical's a little less viable, but I think with things like Play Rough now to hit those dragon types that Ice Beam would have been hitting, you've got that offensive unpredictability a little bit even better now. So I'm really happy about that. It's just hard to predict an AZELF in general. I think it just can be run either way. That makes it really hard to prep for in matchups, and that can put a lot of pressure on opponents. It's got a great natural speed, like I was saying. When Raikou got sniped, I wanted to pick up that 110 plus Pokemon, and AZELF fit that role perfectly. It's also a ground immunity, which is nice. I don't have a ground resist in my first 3 Pokemon. Not that FINI, I feel like all 3 of my first 3 Pokemon aren't ground weak either, especially like FINI and SCIZOR can like really exploit ground types. But just a powerful, like a banded ground type, although to be fair, I have the best banded ground type in the game right now. Maybe Zygarde, I guess, is up there, but if you wanted to exploit that, AZELF kind of helps with that. It's also got Pivot and Hazard Action, which is something I want to talk about. It gives me that fast U-turner. When I've got things like FINI and SCIZOR, I can quickly pivot out if there's and switch out into these bulkier Pokemon I drafted, both early and late in the draft. If I'm afraid of maybe like a Dark Pulse headed this thing's way, and we'll talk about that in a little bit actually. But and then also Hazard Action. So like I was saying, in my first 4 picks, I now have managed to have 2 clearers and 2 setters. So no matter what, I think at this point in the draft, if I just pick up like one or two of the down the line of those roles, I'm going to be in a really good position where on an average week, I don't feel like I have to bring a low tier Pokemon just to fill a role that needs to be important in a particular match. If my opponent has, if I need to bring Defog, I can just bring it on FINI, and I'm going to be totally fine with that on an average week. If I need to bring Rocks, I can just bring Lead AZELF, and it's going to be okay. I don't have to bring something low tier, so I'm just going to, it takes a lot of pressure off of me in team building to try to fit low tier Pokemon every single week, and now I can focus on bringing the threats that I want to bring and not compromising my team's overall integrity. So taking a look at the next Pokemon, this is an old school Krakenation staple that is coming back for a return, another tour with the Boston Bisharps, and it is Chandelure. Chandelure is an absolute offensive powerhouse. I think this thing gets slept on and how offensively potent it is because it is a breaker, a scarfer, and a sweeper all at once. It's got, I think, a 140 or 145 or something special attack. I think it's 140 special attack stat, and Ghost Stab is insane. People sleep on how effective offensive ghost types are. That's the reason why Gengar is so good, is because Shadow Ball is such a hard move to resist. If you aren't a normal type or a dark type, you can't switch in, and good normal and dark types aren't as common as people think. So especially because things like Gengar, for example, get coverage. But we're not talking about Gengar here. We're talking about Chandelure. And Chandelure, if you're gonna switch in those normal and those dark types, you know what? It's gonna be really hard to eat Fire Blast all day too. So that's even maybe a little bit better in that sense, better stab combination slightly. But so it's got this fantastic breaker or scarfer ability. It can run specs, it can run life orb, it can run boots, it can run scarf obviously, and then also I think people sleep on the fact that it's a potential sleeper. It's got Calm Mind, it's got Trick Room, so if you run these bulkier sets, you can really potentially put the hurt on an opponent as well and go in the kind of like the setup direction or the sweeping direction and just catch people really off guard with Chandelure. Just offensive absolute powerhouse. But then the other thing I want to talk about is that it's got these synergistic typing and abilities. So when things like SCIZOR are afraid of fire moves, and if I don't want to bring FINI or I don't want to have to whittle down FINI that much because FINI doesn't have super reliable recovery, I've got this Flash Fire Chandelure in the back that's going to make my opponent either think twice or I'm going to be able to take advantage. So no matter what, my opponent's never going to feel totally safe clicking that fire move. It might force them to click the suboptimal water move or some other move more often to try to make the middle ground play, and those are the opportunities where maybe FINI can come in and really exploit people. So just something I wanted to think about is that Chandelure just puts people in a really disadvantageous situation where it is just really threatening just on matchup, where people are going to be like, oh my god, Flash Fire Chandelure, Scarf Flash Fire Chandelure clicking Fire Blast. There are not a lot of things scarier on site, I think, especially for the value that I got Chandelure at 8 points. Not a lot of scary things out there. So this Pokemon that I've used a lot with a lot of success in the past. It just finds matchups because offensive ghost types are always good. Things don't switch into Shadow Balls, especially when they're coming off a special attack stat that high. So just my thoughts there. I'm really excited to use this Pokemon. It's just a fun one to have back in the squadron. So we're going to talk about next up. Actually, I drafted Snorlax here originally, but I ended up making some draft maneuvering and got a trade for Pokemon that I'm much happier with, and that is MANDIBUZZ. So if you notice, I picked up a Chandelure and an AZELF, but I did not pick up any Ghost or Dark resists early on in the draft, so I need to make sure I had those Pokemon on lock. Now, MANDIBUZZ isn't a great knockoff switch in, but to be fair, I think FINI is an okay one, and SCIZOR is actually a really good knockoff switch in. But defensive prowess on MANDIBUZZ is insane, especially to beat those Ghost and Dark types up, especially those Ghost types that AZELF and Chandelure were potentially really afraid of. We got this really effective bulk, just fantastically augmented by the fact that Heavy Duty Boots is now an item, so Heavy Duty Boots MANDIBUZZ can just put on so much work. It's obviously not much of a win condition itself. It's not able to generate a ton of offensive pressure, but Foul Play is not a move to sleep on. So this defensive prowess, great natural bulk, good defensive typing, Heavy Duty Boots existing. It's got pivot action, and then it's a reliable hazard clear. So I picked up basically now, I'd say 2.5 hazard clears. I don't think SCIZOR is going to be running defog every single week if I really don't want to have to. But I picked up MANDIBUZZ, which now at this point in the draft, I feel like ground types are completely answered. I can never be ground weak if I have a MANDIBUZZ on my team, and I can never really be weak. I can never really have bad hazard clearing when I have MANDIBUZZ, because MANDIBUZZ can easily slap on defog every single week and feel great about it. So we also have a defensive pivot in MANDIBUZZ here. And this is going to be, I think, really key here. We got this great defensive pivot. We've got things like GARCHOMP and AZELF and Chandelure. GARCHOMP is okay, but I guess these really offensive Pokemon that don't necessarily want to have to eat hits and chew hits throughout the match. So MANDIBUZZ can come in, be a slow slow, tanky Pokemon come in, click that U-turn, that slow pivot action, bring in something like an AZELF to wall break or threaten or just something to put some offensive pressure on, and I'm going to do that without losing much momentum. So I think MANDIBUZZ ended up being a much better fit than the Snorlax. I drafted Snorlax to be a Ghost Speeder, but I feel like I ended up getting a better Ghost Speeder, to be honest, with Foul Play. And just like good typing, and then just filling more roles than Snorlax would have for my team for only 1 point more. So I was pretty happy with this. You can make sure to let me know in the comment section below though if you disagree with the decision here. So next up on the list, we've got coming back from a tour of duty last season, we've got Swellow. Swellow is just a Pokemon that I always slam the pick on easily, no sweat. Because it is a low-cost speed tier. The fact that it is 125 speed, but it's going to be a low-cost Pokemon that is still good. Like, if you look down here at Pokemon that are above 120, you're looking at things like Noivern, like Crobat, and not that any of these Pokemon are like, I don't even know after that, like Jolteon's really bad. Like, if you're looking down here for really big speed tiers, I think you're going to have a bad time. And so Swellow, the fact that I could secure Swellow in the first pick of day one after it almost got sniped, I think just makes this draft immediately immensely more threatening. It forces people to run Scarfers, and just it's a Pokemon that's a low tier. It only costed me 6 points, but I've demonstrated that it's a threat in my hands before, and I think that makes people have to respect it, and they're going to have to bring Scarfers that I'm going to be able to exploit with things like SCIZOR. So SCIZOR is going to love Swellow, I think, as a partner. Just because Swellow forces Scarfers all day long, and SCIZOR beats up Scarfers all day long. So it's got that low-cost speed tier that's going to help me very effectively up top, my up-top Pokemon, because Pokemon are going to be forced to run Scarf a lot for Swellow. When you have a good speed tier mon like this, it's a powerful attacker on either side, as you may already know. Facade or Boom Burst, Scrappy Boom Burst, Facade, U-Turn are just all really good moves. You got the Heat Wave on the special side, just a really good Pokemon. Can't really run Boots, which is unfortunate. It's pretty item reliant. Either you got to run that Flame Orb for the Facade boost, or you got to run the Specs or the Life Orb to boost your special attack. But still pretty good overall. It doesn't need to take a lot of hits, so heavy duty Boots, I guess, is nice to just increase your chance to take the one hit. But for the most part, I think you're just going to usually be pretty okay taking Rocks damage, because Swellow's not really taking any attacks along the way anyways. And then finally, like I was saying earlier, you're forced to respect Swellow on matchup. The fact that it's a 6-point Pokemon that demands that you prep for it as hard as Swellow is, or will eat you alive, is really nice. When I talk about like picking up threats in low tiers, it just means Pokemon that if your opponent doesn't prep for, they're gonna have a bad time. And I think Swellow is easily one of those Pokemon where it's gonna be just hard to prep for. It can be run on either side, so you've got to make sure you got to answer a physical Swellow, and you've got to make sure you got an answer to special Swellow, or you're gonna have a bad day in the park. Just gotta respect the matchup, and that's gonna open up things hopefully for other Pokemon on my draft. So next up, this is a newcomer to the Boston Bisharps. Never been drafted before, but we are going to take a stab at it. We've got MIENSHAO. So MIENSHAO is a Pokemon I'm actually pretty excited about. I've always really wanted to draft it, and just never really fit, because at this point, usually you have to draft it pretty early, because it's a pretty high-cost Pokemon at 10 points in our system. And so usually at that point in the draft, like I said, I'm looking to make sure I'm securing rolls, as you saw. It's not, and this Pokemon isn't really a hazard setter or a clear or anything like that. So I usually try to steer clear of doing those early. The fact that in the 8th round I could get MIENSHAO kind of changed my tune, because I already knew that I had secured the things I was looking for. I got the bag, we were good. So then I got this great speed tier in MIENSHAO at 105, a little faster than GARCHOMP. Again, outspeeding those base 100s all day long. It's an absolutely silly wall breaker, which is going to open up things for things like Swellow and SCIZOR to just go to town later on in the match. The reckless high jump kicks are going to absolutely clean up shop, which means this Pokemon is really good at warping matchups on site. Just by the fact that this Pokemon exists, I know my opponents, against my team, are going to have to run a lot of physically defensive Pokemon, because I've got MIENSHAO, I've got SCIZOR, I've got GARCHOMP. So those are three insane physically offensive Pokemon. That means things like Special Swellow, things like Chandelure, things like AZELF, if it's being run specially, can just potentially eat opposing teams alive, when I think a Pokemon like MIENSHAO just is going to demand so much prep on a week-to-week basis, because otherwise it will kill you. It's going to be insane. I'm really excited to use this Pokemon. I'm glad that I got it here, because this is never a Pokemon I would have taken earlier in the draft. So the fact that I got it as late as I did, it makes me really, really happy. So just another thing I want to really quick touch upon is the fact that it got close combat. So the Regenerator set doesn't have to, like, Reckless High Jump Kick is probably still generally your move of choice if you're running a Reckless set, but the Regenerator set is also really viable on MIENSHAO. Probably equally as viable. It's obviously not as much of a wall breaker, but it's a good offensive pivot, and now you gotta have Close Combat on that set, so Close Combat's going to be a lot better because you're never going to risk, just for the same reason that Lopunny no longer runs High Jump Kick. Lopunny now almost always runs Close Combat. MIENSHAO, I feel like on the Regenerator sets, will be running primarily Close Combat to not risk misses, get the Regenerator recovery, come in, click an attack, Close Combat, you turn on out of there, get your Regenerator damage, rinse and repeat. Whereas the Breaker sets probably still might prefer High Jump Kick Reckless because that was so absurdly powerful. But I feel like Close Combat is a sneaky good buff to this Pokemon that I wanted to touch upon. So next up, this is a Pokemon where I really wanted to draft Vikavolt here, actually, but I did not manage to pick up my Vikavolt again this season. Just got sniped a little bit before me, so we ended up having to go for Boltund. Boltund is a fast, powerful electric, so I can kind of live with that. It wasn't my favorite fit here. I already had the Swellow at the speed tier, so I didn't really need this Pokemon, but it is a fast and potentially powerful electric when it's clicking those bite moves. Things like Thunder Fang, things like Crunch, Fire Fang, those are all great moves for it. I wish it got Ice Fang. That would be sick, but it doesn't, unfortunately. But one thing I want to talk about, the reason I was more okay going for Boltund once Vikavolt was off the board as my electric type, was that it has great matchup into top tier Pokemon. If you look at least in our format, and most formats in general, if you look at like the top, what probably in most draft formats is like the top of the top list, you're going to see a lot of things like Latios, like Aegislash, like Tornadus Therian, a lot of these kinds of Pokemon, which, if you think about this for a second, Boltund absolutely eats most of those Pokemon alive. There's a lot of fast Pokemon that are weak to, like, a lot of fast, dark weak Pokemon up there. Things like the Latios, the Aegislash of the world. So Strongjaw Crunch is really nice. A lot of Pokemon that are, a lot of bulky waters as well up there. So the Thunder Fang is going to be really cool. So obviously this Pokemon's not very bulky, but it's got a Volt Switch. The biggest problem with this Pokemon is that ground types come in for free, which is where something like Mandibuzz comes in, because when those ground types come in for free to like Earthquake, now we've got the Mandibuzz to pivot into, which I think is going to be very key in this matchup. So I'm excited to see what Boltund can bring to the table. So we're going to move on to the next Pokemon here. And I actually ended up having to trade up pretty intensely for this guy here. And I ended up being able to pick up Regirock. Regirock is a Pokemon, like I said, I traded up for really intensely. Because in the next round, I was not really worried about a snipe. I didn't think I was going to get sniped. If I did get sniped, I had a really great backup that I was just happy to take, to be honest. So I traded up for this guy to get Regirock. At this point, I only have Garchomp and AZELF as my rockers, both of which are pretty decent rockers. Garchomp better than AZELF, but I don't have any more than that. And I've actually had a draft with Garchomp and AZELF as my only rockers really once before. And what I found in that draft is that you're just constantly feeling bad that one of these offensive powerhouses has to be a rocker every week. Because what if I want to bring like a Swords Dance, or what if I want to bring like a Nasty Plot AZELF and a Scarf Garchomp? Those are two really good sets that are independent of each other that you might want to bring on a given week that aren't like going at each other's throats, but now you don't have a rocker. So now with Regirock, I've got this really, really reliable low tier rocker, and I can basically sleep easy at night knowing my AZELF's not going to have to be lead Stealth Rocks every single week. Check to many key threats is another thing I wanted to talk about. Because it is a rock type, which is normally a very bad defensive typing, but when your rock type is as bulky as Regirock is, and the fact that it now has body press to beat up on steel types, coming off a monstrous 200 defense stat, I think this Pokemon actually is really, really cool there. It also has Iron Defense, which gives it some underrated sweeping potential, I think. It has things like Rock Polish, and not that Rock Polish Regirock is great, but that set exists, and now you can run things like Iron Defense or Curse to boost up those defenses and those attack stats. So now maybe with like a Curse set, you can run Body Press, Stone Edge, Curse, Rest, and you're running a really interesting potential late game-ish win con. But like I said, this Pokemon's great natural bulk allows it to check many key threats. It's a big flying resist for my team, which is really, really nice. The thing can beat up on most flying types in the game, and it's got, I think, really underrated sleeping potential that just kind of people sleep on, especially now that it got Body Press. So these next two picks are kind of funny, guys, so don't hate on me too much, but we picked up Roselia in the second to last round for only 2 points. People laugh at me because I'm a big Roserade hater, but for all the reasons I hate Roserade, I love Roselia because it is just Roserade, but cheaper. The problem with Roserade is I feel like it's just kind of overcosted for it's one of those Pokemon that's like, you see it, you think, like, I say this word a lot on the channel, but I think it's kind of a trap mon, where you see it, you see spikes, you see toxic spikes, you see like, oh, good offenses, good special defense, but then you realize not a great defensive typing, to be honest, so the bulk is kind of mitigated by that. Great speed tier, I guess, but the problem is it's like, you're going to have to run Scarf, which means you're to really exploit that speed tier in most matchups, or bulk, so you're either not exploiting your speed tier, or you're not really running the optimal Roserade set because you're not able to use those spikes or T-Box spikes if you're running Scarf as often. So I feel like Roselia all at once is almost a quarter of the cost of Roserade in our draft, and it just does all the exact same things because it's a useful hazard setter in specific matchups. If my opponent doesn't have good clears, I might definitely consider bringing a Roselia, because Roselia is a pretty reliable spiker, a T-Spiker, really late in the draft that I got. So if my opponent's really weak to T-Spikes, I can, obviously I have a FINI, so I have to be aware of that, but if my opponent's really weak to T-Spikes, I can bring the Roselia, slap, and in those matchups also, something I want to talk about, slap down those T-Spikes and do a lot of damage. And if I don't want to bring FINI, because I don't want to set up T-Spikes in a game with FINI, because TAPU FINI is going to obviously, at times, not prevent my opponent's Pokemon from getting toxic by the toxic spikes on the field. But, so if I don't want to bring FINI in those specific matchups, I'm going to be a little more vulnerable to what exactly? To bulky waters, because that's what I drafted FINI for at that early in the draft. If you remember, I drafted FINI for bulky water types. Now with Roselia, I have another Pokemon that's great into bulky waters. It's a Scald switching, deceptively decent. I think it's like 85 special attack or something, maybe even a little higher. So really usable special attack with things like Giga Drain. Makes this Pokemon actually really, really good into bulky water types. Just to check them, can set up T-Spikes on them, and then you're in a really good spot. So if I am in a matchup where I want to bring T-Spikes, Roselia picks up a little bit of the slack that TAPU FINI leaves all by itself. And I think that's really, really cool. I think this was a really, really great fit for my team. I'm actually really happy with how that worked out. It was really synergistic, and I'm just really happy. The other consideration I had was Vileplume, which is a little different. Doesn't set up T-Spikes, but it was the grounded poison. It was a good grass type, and so I had to weigh that. I just decided that instead of having overall offensive potency, I just wanted to choose the option to run T-Spikes and Spikes instead. And so the final spot, I got memed for this pick pretty hard, but I'm going to, by the end of this video, tell me in the comment section below if I've convinced you guys otherwise, because with my last pick, I take DOTTLER. People are going to laugh. I think people laughed a lot of this. They thought I was ridiculous, but let me tell you guys that DOTTLER is not a meme. It is unironically a legitimate Pokemon that you should be respecting on a week-to-week basis, because DOTTLER somehow, listen, hear me out. DOTTLER has sticky webs. It's also, in my opinion, in our system, the definitively best 1-point Weber. For only 1 point, you are getting a Pokemon with ridiculous natural bulk. Obviously, not the best defensive typing, but really, really great natural bulk, and it has webs. So you are getting, simultaneously, you are getting webs, but because of that great bulk, you're getting a pretty decent wall in a lot of circumstances. And finally, it gets body press. You know what else it gets? Iron defense. Iron defense, body press to beat up on those steel types, webs, and it also gets recovery. So what does this all amount to? Every single time you bring DOTTLER, you can easily bring sticky webs, recover, iron defense, body press, and in a 1-point Pokemon, you have somehow brought webs, a wall, and a potential late game sweeper all at the same time. That is insane for only 1 point. Now, 1 point is the Doldrums. I think Sandslash was the best Pokemon at 1 point, and that was a really great pick. I don't know why it was at 1 point. We must have overlooked that. But beyond that, 1 point mons are like the Doldrums of the worst. We are scraping the bottom of the barrel. And the fact that I got all of these things, webs, a wall, sweeper, at the same time, all at once in a given mon that can do all those things on a given week, sign me up, man. DOTTLER, not a meme. Mark my words, this Pokemon's going to have its way with someone this season. Mark my words. But that rounded out my draft. We ended up exactly at the 100-point budget. So that was the draft. So we'll give you guys a quick rundown of what we picked right here. I was pretty happy with this draft overall. I don't think it's quite as good as what I had last season, but I think it's got a little more synergy perhaps. We'll see. We'll find out. Like I talked about, we got that Tapu FINI to synergize with those Pokemon. Roselia picks up the slack there. We got the Chandelure, the Mandibuzz to answer those ground types. MIENSHAO just breaks like crazy and warps matchup. Same with SWELLOW, just a big matchup warper. And then we got the boy, DOTTLER, the threat, just don't sleep. No matter what you do not sleep on DOTTLER. But let me know what you guys thought of this video. Let me know what you guys are expecting from this team. If you think I have any weaknesses, or if you really like the team, whatever your thoughts are, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below. I want to know what they are. Maybe you guys can give me some advice as to what I should be free agenting, what I should be picking up later on in free agents or through trades. I'd love to hear it. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to leave a comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff, guys, it is always extremely appreciated. Go ahead and click that like button, guys. It helps me continue to grow this channel, as well as if you want to click the notification button, if you are one of the faithful, if you are really hoping to get this channel to grow, and you want to click that bell button down below, you will help this channel in the YouTube algorithms substantially. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for sticking out. Until next time, I will see all of you guys later. Krakenation out.